I don't know who needs to hear this, but there's a huge difference between optimism and fantasy. What's the difference? Well, let's check it out. Let's discuss. So, optimism. Cambridge Dictionary defines the word as the quality of being full of hope and emphasizing the good parts of a situation, or a belief that something good will happen. What about fantasy? Same dictionary says that fantasy is a pleasant situation that you enjoy thinking about, but is unlikely to happen, or the activity of imagining things like this. Truth of it is, there are some similarities between being optimistic and fantasy that make people to get confused and think one is the other. So let's look at some of these similarities. First one is that optimism and fantasy make you feel good. They bring good vibes. And also, optimism and fantasy require a shift in one's mindset about the present situation that someone might find themselves. But there are differences between optimism and fantasy, and those differences are evident especially when it comes to things relating to money and material comforts. Alright, let's examine some of these differences. So, number one, optimism can see a situation for what it is, but it will focus on the good parts. Fantasy, on the other hand, does not necessarily see the situation for what it is. It imagines what the situation could be. So, for example, an optimistic person may recognize that there are certain things in life that he or she cannot afford right now, but he or she can see a path or create a path that is largely controlled by himself or herself that will get him or her to being able to acquire such a thing. Fantasy thinking, on the other hand, will only imagine the joys of owning such an item without actually being able or willing to make the requisite sacrifices required to afford such an item. So you see people today, they are very good at imagining a life of luxury, but are they willing to put the effort to get that life of luxury? Not necessarily so. Optimistic people, on the other hand, can imagine that a life of luxury is nice, but they may not necessarily be looking for that kind of life. What they would be interested in is being clear about certain material things that they would like to own, and it is clear to them the path to being able to afford such a thing, and they're willing to make the sacrifices to get those items. Second point, optimistic people accept that money is useful, but they don't believe that money is the source of happiness or that life will be free of problems when they have money. People who live a life of fantasy think that money will resolve whatever inner feelings of insecurity they may have. The truth of it is, having access to money will only heighten such feelings of insecurity. And that's why you find that people who come to a lot of money but do not have the mindset of proper money management, they end up taking actions that deplete their wealth. As a result of having a healthy view of money and material things, optimistic people recognize that being materially well off is not a guarantee in life, and they know that there might be periods where they will not have a lot materially, and during those periods, they don't have a diminished sense of their life's worth, as well as when they have a material excess, those periods do not increase the value of their life. That is the third consideration of when someone is optimistic versus when someone is living a life of fantasy. Someone who lives a life of fantasy thinks that their life will be more valuable with what they own. People who live a life of fantasy imagine that owning more gives life more meaning, and that is actually a fallacy. Point number 4. When things go south and things are not working as planned, optimistic people are able to accept responsibility for whatever role they may have played in things going not as planned. And because they're willing to accept responsibility, they can learn from such experiences and recognize actions that they should not take when they face a similar situation in the future. Fantasy thinking, on the other hand, doesn't imagine that things should ever go wrong. And when that inevitable happens, they play the victim. And that victim mentality gives them comfort in avoiding any responsibility that should come to them for the way things may have turned out in a negative way. And they are not prepared to be able to handle negative situations in life. There's nothing wrong in hoping for something better in life. Hope is good. Everyone needs hope. However, your hope should not be without a solid foundation. In addition to having hope, it is healthy to have a dose of skepticism that allows you to plan for and be emotionally ready for a worst case scenario. And this healthy combination of hope with skepticism prepares you to be strong when things might not be going as planned, and it helps you not to become paralyzed with fear or anxiety or any other negative emotions when things may not be working exactly 100%. And that optimism helps you to be able to identify a path towards resolving any issues that may be on ground. So, live a life of optimism and as much as possible avoid fantasy. Thanks for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video, as always, if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you're the first to see new videos when they pop up. If you have an opinion about the difference between optimism and fantasy, please leave a comment in the comment section below. And if you've got an experience of how those two have played out in your life, it will also be good to see your experience. As always, stay blessed and have a beautiful day.